You're on Outsiders with Rowan Dean, Ross Cameron, David Pellowe and Luke Isaacs, who we will have on the wall, one from the Sunshine Coast and one from Brisbane. They are the two promoters from
Axiomatic Events.
Axiomatic Events, who were intending to bring two Canadian public intellectuals, you might say, free speech activists, outsiders. We've had them on the show before. Lauren Southern is really the voice that brought the plight of white South African farmers to the world, and her fellow Canadian, who is a leading authority on intelligence around the world, a kind of public intellectual. We were to have this speaking tour of Australia, which is in doubt, has a question mark over it as a consequence of the inability of the two speakers to get a visa. Now, we understand the Minister for Immigration is looking at this right now. A decision will be made tomorrow morning. But, gentlemen, welcome to Outsiders.
Thank you.
Paul, why don't we ask you to sort of open the batting and just give our listeners a factual summary of where we are right now.
David?
So where we are right now is we're actually expecting to be able to go ahead with the tour. There's been some unusual delays in getting the visas processed. We applied for the correct visa, a working visa, 408, some months ago, and typically they should only take 10 days to get approved. But there's been some slow walking of the application process, and so where we are right now is we've had to apply for the tourist visa to try and allow them to travel. That's the electronic, the ETA visa, which lets them travel without needing to give them permission to work. So Lauren was planning to come nice and early and get the lay of the land and do some tourism exercises. And so we applied for the ETA under immigration lawyer advice. Now, normally that's an instant approval, but for some reason, that was flagged for manual processing, and then the manual decision came back that she was declined. Now, that's not unusual. That's it's unusual that she was declined, but it's not uncommon that a working class visa, a 408 class visa, needs to actually take a little bit of extra time. And so the advice is usually in that case, travel on an ETA, and the 408 will probably be approved while you're here before you start working. So we're expecting that if the department plays the applications with a straight bat, that the visas should be approved in due time and the tour will be able to go ahead.
So, Luke, tell us, this comes on the heels of a mayor in New Zealand turning down Lauren Southern. So, basically tell us what's happened in New Zealand first before we get back to Australia. Luke?
My gosh, that was a fascinating one, because we got a call from the Bruce Mason Theatre that we had booked approximately 3 months ago. In that booking, everyone was groovy, everyone was happy. Unfortunately, unlike the events that we're expecting protesters here in Australia, they had to make the venue public long before our 24-hour period where we were going to release the other venues. What happened with Bruce Mason is they called us and they said, we are so sorry, due to security risks to the venue, for the first time we're going to have to actually close an event down. We've never done this before. What we didn't realise is 20 minutes previously to that, the Mayor, Phil Goff, had actually said that he was not allowing Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern to be allowed to speak at any council-run venues. And now that is under severe scrutiny by a group Dave might explain to you very shortly, because he acted like the Fuhrer, and it doesn't look like he has acted within the law.
So, David, I'll go to you now. So we're not accusing the mayor of being the Fuhrer, but tell us your understanding of the petition that's been raised against the mayor and what it says about free speech in New Zealand, that they're shutting Lauren out like this.
Well, it is incredibly authoritarian of the mayor to summarily decide that political views he doesn't agree with won't be afforded any platform that is normally available for public hire. It's not like the taxpayers, the residents of Auckland, had to pay for it or subsidise it. it's something that the ratepayers would have profited very handsomely from. It's a commercial run premises and its user pays. However, he's decided that he's going to essentially make this decision and discriminate against views that he disagrees with. And there's a group of people in New Zealand we're very encouraged by. On one hand, it looks very grave for New Zealand's freedom of speech. But on the other hand, we've got this group of people from across the political spectrum. They don't necessarily agree with what the speakers are going to be saying, but they do agree that everybody has the right to say it. And so they formed a coalition for freedom, and they're raising $50,000. In the first day alone, they've already reached $17,500.
So David, let's give them a plug. Tell us again their details so that people in New Zealand, there are many outsiders in New Zealand who should get on to supporting this cause for free speech. So who is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe the web address is Coalition for Freedom, or forgive me, this is freespeechcoalition.nz.
Fantastic.
So the website's freespeechcoalition.nz, and they're wanting to get a judicial review of whether or not the Mayor has actually violated New Zealand's Bill of Rights and New Zealand's Human Rights Bill.
Okay, now Luke, I want to go back to you quickly. We mentioned, was kind of skirting around it. All the reports you read about Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux, it's always alt-right, it's always hard-right, it's always far-right. We're getting all this terminology. They're treated as if they're pariahs. Now, we know, as Ross said, that Lauren Southern's biggest action that she's probably best known for, apart from being banned from the UK, is the Helping the White Farmers and the film she made called Farmland. But she did this particular stunt about an Islamic religious figure, something about Allah being whatever, which got her into all sorts of trouble and got her banned from the UK. So tell us the very worst of our two so-called alt-right, far-rights. How alt-right, far-right are they? What's the worst things they've done? Luke?
Oh, well, to start off with, the term alt-right and far-right is a total misrepresentation. The alt-right and the far-right despise them, in fact. And I've received countless messages, and so have they, about being race traitors and not hard enough for the hardest of the right. And, you know, they're really not liked by the people they're supposed to be associating with, like your Richard Spencers and your David Dukes. You know, like, they despise them and they despise in return. I think the worst thing that everybody keeps bringing up was the, Allah is trans, Allah is gay, Allah is, I can't remember the exact wording, but Allah is...
why did she do that particular stunt? You don't have to bother about the stunt. Why did she do that stunt? It was hugely offensive, presumably, to many Muslims, and that got her banned from the UK. So what was she trying to do?
Well, I think it was in response to this Vice article that, you know, there's been academics who have suggested that Jesus Christ, the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter were homosexuals. And it was basically to demonstrate the double standard in the UK between being able to publish those things as if they were academic studies and with no offence for the Christian population, and how the Muslim population might respond to the same thing.
Interesting. Ross?
Yes, well, tell us, we are very concerned on the facts. Okay, we'd love to get all the facts out there. And so I might ask, I don't know which of you is better qualified to answer, but I have a concern that when the sort of deep state finds an opinion or an individual they don't like, there is an art form developing which I might describe as bureaucratic censorship, which is to identify every possible impediment that may be placed in the way of the opinion, whether that is a financial impediment, the cost of security, for example, the slowness in approvals of a request. Can you tell us what you are looking at in terms of cost? Are cost impediments being placed in front of the tour?
David?
Well, what we've seen with this visa application process is a highly suspicious length of time that it's taking to get the right visa approved quickly. It seems as if it's being slow-walked. It seems as if the bureaucrats who are processing this application are processing it with political filters rather than with just dealing with the facts that are in front of them. And so, you know, that's been very frustrating. We've had to employ great lawyers to try and hurry it up and see what the hold-up is. And there's been no challenges that have been put forth. The only thing the Immigration Department has asked for is a criminal record check. And we've been told that's fairly similar to a blue card background check here in Australia, as if we're putting on a Wiggles show for kids. It's suspicious and curious as to why they would ask for that. But at any rate, there's nothing on their criminal records. They have no records of charges or let alone convictions. So we're not sure why that is. And you're right. We saw with Milo Yiannopoulos, we had the example of the Victorian Police Department blaming the victim, the organisers of the show, who were, organising a standard event with a standard crowd size, and well-behaved patrons all went along. And then we have the ultra-left who are jumping in and causing all kinds of trouble, making feral behaviour out of themselves. And then the police send the bill to the organisers as if they were the badly behaved people, as if to say, if you ever do this again, then you will really have to pay for it. Please don't come back.
Well, so
you've got to wonder about the motivations in that kind of behaviour.
Well, certainly the things Lauren is well known for, apart from the stunt we talked about earlier, she was dumped by her party in Canada for suggesting that there is no rape culture in the West. That's very pertinent in terms of things that have been happening in this country. She's also, she's fairly unorthodox. She said there are only two genders. Can you imagine? Shock, horror. Luke, where did she get the idea that there are only two genders? We better stop this woman coming into this country damn fast.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, and it's funny because, men who have chosen very, very wisely not to pick a side in conservative or liberal politics, men like the great Dr. Jordan Peterson, will cite those same facts from a psychological, anthropological, biological perspective all day, and there is zero complications. People come out in droves to listen to him, from classical liberals, libertarians, anarchists, conservatives, whatever. But when a 23-year-old feminine blonde girl does the same thing, she's terrifying, utterly terrifying to the establishment. And we're watching this when we see organisations like CAF, who are threatening to disrupt our Melbourne and Brisbane events, and TIFA, this highly organised YAL, and the Socialist Alternative, the same old faces. They've gone away and multiplied in number since the Milo event, so much to the point that the counter-terrorism that we work very closely with the state police are more terrified of the Melbourne event than they were of the Milo by about 600%. This is really scary stuff. And the reason that we need to get ahead of this narrative now is because if we lose this battle, if Lauren and Stefan are disallowed from coming into this country, we have essentially set the handbook, the playbook for the ultra-left terrorists, and most of them are listed as terrorist organisations by state police, on how to silence dissent in the future, or unpopular facts and opinions like there are only two genders.
That's terrifying. You're right that that's terrifying. And, I mean, she's also got in trouble for saying that the Black Lives Matter movement caused more deaths than the Ku Klux Klan. So she obviously has some pretty strong views, but you could argue that these views are aren't extremist views. They are, some of them might be viewed by some people as extremist, but there's many conservative people who hold similar views, or certainly along similar lines. If she is stopped, as you say, Luke, what future for conservative thought, or what future for conservative free speech in this country?
Well, as you know, it was the left in the 60s and 70s that defended the right to free speech, and somehow that hot potato has now fallen into the conservative lap. One of the things, as somebody in alt media, and I'm sure Pellowe and everybody else that we talk about in alt media have the liberty to do that a lot of mainstream media people don't have, is we get to explore things. We're just all explorers. Any one person who stands up in a men's club somewhere and starts proclaiming they're the panacea to the nation's problems, it has been, in the 20th century we saw a couple of them, and they didn't do too good by us in the 20th century. I think the whole idea that all opinions, all exploration should be on the table so we can sort out great policy and great direction for our country's future has to be allowed. And it's pretty well straightforward. I don't think the anti-fascists act more like fascists than any of the actual fascists I've met in this country. Let's be honest.
Well, I'm still waiting to meet my first fascist. I'd quite like to. I've been described as one from time to time, but a pretty boring fascist, I would say. Look, I understand that the Minister for Immigration, Peter Dutton, is basically got this right on his lap at the moment, but that he has been fairly intensely lobbied by other members of Parliament to constrain Australian thought by refusing these two Canadians, neither of whom has not a charge or conviction of any kind, whose threat to Australia is purely in their opinions. But is it the case that we know that the Minister for Immigration has been lobbied by members of Parliament to stop these people coming to Australia?
David?
Yeah, look, it's an excellent question. I've personally called my local member and he's lobbied Peter Dutton on my behalf. There's countless other people around Australia who are concerned about the freedom of speech, are concerned about the government being bullied and held hostage and manipulated by the ultra-left to shut down ideas that they don't like and unapproved opinions. And so, look, the feedback that we've gotten is that the minister's hands are actually tied in this case. He can't give a positive direction that somebody must be allowed in. He can give a negative direction that an unsavoury character must be excluded from the country. But what we're hoping that the government is able to do through the pressure of people who love liberty and freedom in Australia and the freedom of speech in particular is that we, ask the Immigration Department, just play this with a straight bat. Keep politics
David,
out of it altogether.
I'd just say very briefly before we go that it seems to me, it strikes me that the big offence that Lauren made was insulting Islam, offending Islam. We've seen over the years no shortage of offence directed at Christians and Jews. So you've had hate preachers calling for the death of Jews. You've had the Piss Christ, I don't know if you remember that, so a crucifix in urine paraded around as a work of art. So all of which is part and parcel of the debate about free speech. But it does seem to be, in this instance, there's a different set of rules for Islam. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, look, I mean, even if you just... it's different rules for the left. Kathy Griffin, who held up a facsimile of the severed bloody head of Donald Trump, clearly inciting violence and inspiring it to people, was allowed in and nobody tried to stop her. If you don't like it, if you're going to get offended, don't buy a ticket and don't come. It's that easy.
On that note, let's hope you do sell lots of tickets. Thank you both, Luke Izaak, David Pellowe. Thank you both from Axiomatic Events. And good luck with the tour. And fingers crossed it all works out well and everybody is safe and sound and has an interesting evening hearing from Stefan and Lauren.